Elderly woman was evicted and left only with her dog, but he hid a secret worth a fortune. Dorothy Mitchell watched in shock as suitcases were thrown on the sidewalk while her 3 children argued loudly at the front door of the house. At 68 years old, she never imagined she would be evicted from her own home, where she had lived for 45 years and raised her family with so much love and dedication. "Mom, you don't understand. We can't take care of you here anymore. We have our own families, our commitments," said Richard, the eldest son, avoiding his mother's gaze. "You'll be fine. You can manage on your own." "Where will I live? This is my home." Dorothy tried to argue, but her voice trembled with desperation. "That's for you to figure out. It's no longer our problem," replied Patricia, the middle child, crossing her arms. "We've already done so much for you all these years." Stephen, the youngest, simply nodded in agreement with his siblings. The 3 had decided to sell the house to split the money, and their mother's presence was getting in the way of their plans. Dorothy felt her world collapse when she realized that her own children, whom she had breastfed, cared for when they were sick, and worked tirelessly to educate, now saw her only as a burden. Tears streamed down her wrinkled face as she tried to process such cruelty. "What about Buddy? Can't he stay either?" she asked, looking at her 15-year-old companion, a large golden dog watching her with concern. "That old dog? Take him with you." "One less expense for us," laughed Richard, causing laughter from his siblings. Buddy seemed to understand the tension of the moment. The animal approached Dorothy and rested his head on her leg, as he always did when she was sad. It was his gesture of affection and protection that she had known since he was a puppy. With a shattered heart, Dorothy took only one suitcase with her most necessary clothes and a few personal items. Buddy followed her faithfully, carrying in his mouth the old blanket he always used to sleep on. "Let's go, my friend. At least I have you," she murmured, stroking the animal's head. The neighbors watched the scene from their windows, some with pity, others merely curious. Mrs. Eleanor, who had lived in the house next door for over 20 years, discreetly waved to Dorothy, but didn't dare intervene in the family dispute. Walking through the city streets with the heavy suitcase and Buddy by her side, Dorothy felt completely lost. She had nowhere to go, nor enough resources to rent a decent place. Her pension was modest and barely covered her basic needs. The sun was setting when she spotted a small shed at the back of a vacant lot on the outskirts of town. The structure had been abandoned for years, with loose tiles and peeling walls, but it could serve as temporary shelter. Buddy sniffed the place carefully before giving his silent approval. The dog had this peculiar trait of always inspecting new environments, as if he could detect dangers that humans didn't notice. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. In the first days in the makeshift shed, Dorothy and Buddy faced hardships she had never imagined. The cold of the early morning seeped through the cracks in the walls, and the dampness left everything wet by morning. To get food, Dorothy began selling her few valuable belongings. A wedding ring she cherished was traded for a week's worth of groceries. An old watch from her late husband provided money for Buddy's dog food. The dog seemed to understand the difficult situation and never complained when Dorothy divided the food equally between them. Sometimes he would even push his portion closer to her, as if wanting to make sure his owner ate enough. During their daily walks through the neighborhood in search of work or opportunities, Buddy began to display strange behavior that caught Dorothy Mitchell's attention. The animal would insistently stop in front of certain houses, always those where crying or raised voices could be heard. "What is it, Buddy? Why do you always stop here?" Dorothy would ask, but the dog would just stare intently at the residence, as if he could see through the walls. One morning, Buddy flatly refused to move from the front of a modest house where a family seemed to be in despair. Dorothy could hear shouts and lamentations coming from inside. Concerned by the animal's insistence, she decided to knock on the door to check if everything was all right. A middle-aged woman answered with eyes red from crying. "Sorry to bother you, ma'am. It's just that my dog won't leave the front of your house, and I got worried," explained Dorothy. "Oh, it's no bother. Today is a very difficult day for us," replied the woman, wiping away tears. "We lost all our savings in a scam. 20 years of hard work thrown away because of our naivety." Dorothy felt her heart tighten, as she recognized her own suffering in the stranger's story. Even with so little, she offered the only $10 she had in her pocket. "I can't accept this, ma'am. You're going through hard times too," said the woman, looking at Dorothy's simple, worn-out clothes. It was then that Buddy did something completely unexpected. The dog ran into the house's backyard and began digging vigorously in a specific spot near an old tree. "Hey, stop that!" shouted the woman's husband coming out of the house. "Don't let that dog ruin our garden." But Buddy kept digging determinedly, ignoring the shouts. In no time, his paws brought to the surface something that made everyone fall silent. A small, rusty metal box. The family looked at the box in astonishment. They had lived in that house for only 5 years and had never seen that object before. Carefully, they opened the lid and found old documents wrapped in plastic and a small, ornate key. "These papers are very old," said the man, examining the yellow documents. "They look like land deeds, but I don't recognize the names." Dorothy carefully took the papers and was intrigued by the quality of the handwriting and official stamps. Even without fully understanding the content, she felt there was something important in those documents. "May I take these to have someone look at them more closely?" she asked. "Perhaps it's something valuable for you." The family agreed, curious to discover what Buddy had found. They thanked Dorothy and said goodbye, promising to keep in touch if they found out anything interesting about the discovery. Back at the warehouse, Dorothy examined the documents by candlelight. The words were hard to understand, written in technical language she didn't master, but she managed to identify dates from over 20 years ago. Buddy lay down beside her, watching attentively, as if he understood the importance of that moment. The dog had shown impressive intuition in finding those buried papers. In the following days, Buddy continued with his peculiar behavior. During their walks, he would stop in front of a small market where the owner, a man with a tired appearance, was slowly and dejectedly sweeping the sidewalk. "Good morning, sir," Dorothy greeted politely. "Good morning, ma'am. That's a handsome dog you have," replied the man, who introduced himself as George Patterson. During the casual conversation, Dorothy discovered that George was facing financial difficulties keeping the market open. He told her that his father had been a real estate broker decades ago, but many important documents were lost when the family moved. "My father always said he had important papers stored somewhere, but we never managed to find anything," sighed George. Intrigued by the coincidence, Dorothy decided to show the documents Buddy had found. George nearly dropped the papers when he saw the handwriting. "This writing, it's my father's, I'd recognize it anywhere," he exclaimed, moved. "Where did you get this?" Dorothy told the whole story of how Buddy had dug up and found the box. George was impressed by the animal's intuition and asked to examine the documents more closely. Together, they discovered that the papers referred to a plot of land in the city center that had belonged to George's father many years ago. The current value of that property could be considerable, depending on its legal status. Grateful for the discovery and impressed by Dorothy's story, George offered her a job at his market. It wasn't anything grand, just organizing some documents and helping with cleaning, but it would be a modest income and would allow Buddy to stay by her side. Dorothy accepted gratefully. It was the first real opportunity that had come her way since she had been thrown out of her home. The work was simple, but she felt useful again. During the first weeks at the market, Dorothy organized piles and piles of old papers that George had accumulated over the years. Buddy always lay at her feet, attentively watching the customers come and go. It was a frequent customer, Dr. Margaret, a retired 72-year-old lawyer who noticed Dorothy's dedication with the old documents. Margaret was an elegant woman with neatly combed white hair and delicate glasses who always bought basic goods at the market. "Do you have experience with legal documents?" asked Margaret, observing how Dorothy carefully sorted the papers. "No, Doctor. I'm just organizing them," replied Dorothy humbly. Margaret smiled and explained that she had been a lawyer specializing in real estate law for 40 years. When she heard the story of the documents found by Buddy, she offered to help investigate the legal situation of the land. Properties in the city center are complicated. Many deeds were lost during urban renovations and changes at the city hall, explained Margaret, "but I can take a look without charging anything. Consider it a favor from one retiree to another." Margaret's initial investigation revealed intriguing information. The land had belonged to a man named William James Mitchell, who had mysteriously disappeared 25 years ago, leaving behind a confusing legal situation. The family could never prove the loss or locate documents proving ownership, explained Margaret. The land remained in a legally undefined status. Buddy, who always paid attention to conversations, pricked up his ears when Margaret mentioned the name William James Mitchell. The dog began to walk in circles, showing an agitation Dorothy had never seen before. "What is it, my friend? Does that name mean something to you?" asked Dorothy, petting the animal. Margaret grew curious about Buddy's reaction and decided to investigate more deeply. Her research revealed that William James had a brother named Henry Mitchell, who lived in the rural area of the city. "If we can find this brother, perhaps we can clarify this whole situation," suggested Margaret. The following weekend, Margaret, Dorothy, and Buddy made the trip to the rural property where Henry Mitchell supposedly lived. The address led to a simple house, surrounded by crops and a small orchard. An elderly man with completely white hair and hands calloused from so much farm work appeared at the door when they heard Buddy's bark. He looked at the group with curiosity and some suspicion. "We're looking for Mr. Henry Mitchell," said Margaret politely. "That's me." "How can I help you?" the man replied, wiping his hands on an old rag. When Margaret and Dorothy explained about the documents they had found and mentioned the name William James, Henry literally staggered. He had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. "William James, my brother," he murmured, his voice choked. "It's been so many years since I've heard that name." Buddy approached Henry with surprising confidence, as if he had known him for a long time. The man looked at the animal with growing astonishment. "This dog, he reminds me so much of the original Buddy," said Henry, kneeling to pet the animal. "My brother had a dog exactly like this one." The revelation left everyone in silence. Dorothy felt a shiver run down her spine when she realized she had given her dog exactly the same name as the animal that had belonged to Henry's missing brother. "What do you mean, the original Buddy?" asked Dorothy. Henry invited everyone inside and served a simple coffee while telling his story. He explained that William James had disappeared 25 years ago after a terrible fight between the two brothers over family business. "We fought terribly. Things were said that shouldn't have been. He left home that day and never came back," said Henry with tears in his eyes. "I've always regretted not going after him." Margaret showed the documents they had found, and Henry recognized them immediately. He said that William James had hidden these papers before leaving, but never revealed where. "He was always careful with important documents. He had a habit of burying valuable things when he got nervous," explained Henry. The story became even more intriguing when Henry brought out an old box full of vintage photographs. Among them was a picture of William James with a large golden dog, almost identical to the current Buddy. "My brother's Buddy had a special ability. He could find lost things as if he had a supernatural instinct," said Henry. "People in the area always asked for help when they lost something." Dorothy looked at her Buddy, who was observing the photographs with interest, as if recognizing something familiar. The resemblance between the two dogs was impressive, not only in appearance, but also in behavior. "Where did you get your dog?" asked Henry. "It was 15 years ago. A neighbor had a female dog that had puppies and gave me one," replied Dorothy. "I always thought it was strange how he seemed to understand everything I said." Henry was thoughtful for a few minutes before telling something that left everyone speechless. The female dog that had given birth to the puppies was likely a direct descendant of William James's original Buddy. "When my brother disappeared, his dog was lost for a few days. A family here in the area adopted the animal and started breeding a line. They knew those dogs had special characteristics," he explained. The discovery created a deep emotional connection between Henry and the group. It was as if fate had conspired to bring together people and stories that had been linked for decades. In the following days, Henry became a constant presence in Dorothy's life. He visited the market regularly, always accompanied by stories about his missing brother and memories of their youth. During these visits, Buddy continued to demonstrate his peculiar behavior. Now, besides stopping in front of houses where there were problems, he also showed a special interest in certain old objects at the market. One afternoon, An elderly woman entered the establishment seeking help to find important documents she had lost. Buddy immediately went to a specific shelf and began sniffing a cardboard box that had been there for months. "What is your dog doing?" asked the woman. "He has this habit of finding things," replied Dorothy somewhat awkwardly. When they opened the box, they found exactly the documents the woman had been looking for. They had been left there by mistake months earlier, and no one had noticed. Cases like this began to become frequent. Buddy seemed to have developed a reputation in the area as a detective dog capable of locating lost objects and identifying people in need. The animal's fame reached the ears of other people in town, and soon Dorothy began receiving visitors asking for help to find lost items or solve small domestic mysteries. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. Margaret, impressed with Buddy's abilities, decided to investigate the animal's lineage more deeply. Her research revealed that the family breeding these special dogs had kept detailed records for several generations. These dogs were specifically selected and trained to develop sharp intuition, explained Margaret after speaking with the breeders. It's not something supernatural, but the result of decades of careful selection. The scientific explanation reassured Dorothy, who had begun to worry about Buddy's increasingly unusual behavior. Knowing it was a hereditary trait made everything more understandable. Meanwhile, the investigations into William James's whereabouts continued. Margaret had consulted hospital records, nursing homes, and other institutions in the hope of finding clues about the missing man. It was during one of these searches that she discovered information that completely changed the course of the story. In a nursing home in the countryside, an hour's drive from the city, there was a patient without identification who matched William James's physical description. This patient was found 20 years ago in a car accident. He was unconscious and never managed to remember his identity, explained the nursing home director. Only recently has his memory begun to improve. The news left Henry in a state of shock. All these years, he had believed his brother had left of his own will, when in fact, William James had suffered an accident that cost him his memory. The reunion between the brothers was scheduled for the following Sunday. Henry was nervous, not knowing what it would be like to see William James again after so many years and under such difficult circumstances. Dorothy and Buddy accompanied Henry to the nursing home. During the trip, the dog showed increasing agitation, as if he knew something important was about to happen. William James was sitting in a wheelchair in the nursing home garden when they arrived. At 70 years old, he seemed fragile and confused, but his eyes lit up when he saw Buddy. "That dog. I know that dog," said William James, extending a trembling hand to pet the animal. "Or maybe I knew one just like him." Henry approached slowly, with tears in his eyes. "William, it's me, your brother Henry." The recognition was gradual but emotional. William James began to remember fragments of the past, especially when Buddy lay down at his feet, repeating a gesture that the original Buddy had done decades before. I remember burying important papers before leaving home that day," said William James, his voice gaining clarity. "I was afraid you would destroy them in our fight." The confirmation that William James had indeed buried the documents brought relief to everyone. Margaret explained that legally he was still the owner of the land, but a legal process would be necessary to regularize the situation. William James, however, surprised everyone with his reaction. After understanding the amount of time he had lost and the suffering his absence had caused, he refused to claim the property. "I don't deserve any of it. I abandoned my family out of pride and caused so much suffering," he said, clearly tormented by guilt. "Henry should have everything." Henry, in turn, also refused to accept the property alone. All those years, he had carried the weight of guilt for the fight that caused his brother's estrangement. It was Dorothy who suggested a solution that surprised everyone. Watching the suffering of the two brothers and remembering her own experience of abandonment and rejection, she proposed something completely different. "Why don't we turn this land into something that can help other people going through what I went through?" she suggested. "A place where abandoned people can find support and guidance." The idea deeply touched the brothers' hearts. It was a way to transform decades of suffering and separation into something positive and constructive. Margaret offered her legal expertise to make the project viable, and George suggested the space could also offer guidance on documents and bureaucratic matters that often confused ordinary people. In the following months, the project took shape and gained community support. The land in the city centre was transformed into a welcoming space where people in need could find legal guidance, emotional support, and practical help. Buddy became the official mascot of the place, continuing to use his special skills to help visitors find lost objects or simply offering comfort with his warm presence. The transformation in Dorothy's life was dramatic. From an elderly woman rejected and scorned by her own children, she became a respected and beloved figure in the community. Her work at the support center gave new meaning to her existence. News about the support center and Buddy's unusual story reached Dorothy's children. Richard, Patricia, and Stephen showed up one day at the place, clearly ashamed of their previous attitude. "Mum, we were very wrong," said Richard, struggling to find words. "We see now how important and respected you are here. We want to ask for forgiveness and maybe help in some way," added Patricia, genuinely remorseful. Dorothy received them with the dignity and wisdom she had developed during her months of suffering. She held no grudges, but also made it clear she had learned to live without depending on them. "Forgiveness is already given, my children. But now I have a different family. A family that chose me," she said, looking at Buddy and all the friends she had gained. The children offered financial support for the center and began visiting her regularly, not out of obligation, but from genuine recognition of her value as a person and mother. William James, with his memory gradually recovering, decided to move near the center to help with the project and stay close to his brother. Despite his physical limitations, he contributed stories and experiences that helped other elderly people facing similar problems. The center became a landmark in the city, not just for legal and documentary matters, but as a place where life stories were shared and respected. People of all ages began seeking the place, some needing practical help, others simply wanting to hear the inspiring stories that Dorothy and her friends shared. Buddy continued to be a special attraction. Children came specifically to see him find objects hidden by their parents, while adults sought his reassuring company during difficult times. Margaret documented the entire story of Dorothy and Buddy in a book that became popular in the region. The profits from sales were donated entirely to keep the center running. Dorothy's life had found a purpose she never imagined possible. Her experiences of abandonment and suffering, instead of destroying her, transformed her into a source of strength and wisdom for others. During the quieter afternoons at the center, she would often sit with Buddy in the small garden they had created on the grounds. The animal, now over 15 years old, still maintained his special energy and intuition, but preferred calmer moments. "Who would have thought, my friend, that our greatest tragedy would become our greatest blessing," she would murmur, stroking the dog's golden fur. Buddy would respond with that intelligent gaze that always seemed to show he understood every word. His constant presence had been the thread that kept Dorothy connected to hope during the darkest moments. The center began offering workshops on senior citizens' rights, guidance on inheritance and property matters, and support groups for people who had been rejected by family members. Dorothy discovered she had a natural talent for talking to people in distress. Her own experience of pain gave her a credibility and empathy that qualified professionals sometimes couldn't offer. Cases similar to hers began to appear frequently. Abandoned seniors, people who had lost important documents, families facing inheritance disputes, all found at the center a place of welcome and guidance. Buddy's reputation as a detective dog continued to grow. Journalists from neighboring towns came to interview Dorothy about the animal's unusual abilities, always leaving the place impressed by the atmosphere of hope and renewal. Henry moved into a small house near the center and became a daily presence there. His rural experience and practical knowledge perfectly complemented Dorothy's organizational skills. William James, despite his limitations, found at the center a reason to live. He helped with receiving visitors and had an impressive memory for faces and stories, even with the neurological problems caused by the accident. 1 year after the center's opening, a birthday party brought together more than 200 people who had been helped in some way by the work developed there. It was tangible proof that the transformation had been real and lasting. During the party, Dorothy was invited to speak about her experience. Standing before the crowd with Buddy sitting faithfully at her feet, she reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled together. "A year ago, I was desperate, thrown into the street by my own children, with nowhere to live or any means of survival," she began, her voice firm and clear. "Today I'm surrounded by a family I chose, and that chose me." The audience applauded emotionally. Many of the people present had gone through similar experiences and found at the center not only practical solutions, but a new reason to believe in human kindness. "Buddy didn't just save me," continued Dorothy, stroking the dog's head. "He showed me that sometimes our greatest treasures are hidden in life's most difficult moments." Margaret, who was organizing the party, took the microphone and added, "What started with documents buried in a backyard turned into something much bigger. It proved that every person has value, regardless of age or circumstances." George, whose market had benefited from the activity brought by the center, also shared his gratitude. His small store had become a landmark in the community, and his financial situation had improved significantly. The following months brought new challenges and opportunities. The center received a proposal to expand its services, including basic medical care for seniors and literacy classes for adults. Dorothy, now 69 years old, felt more energized and purposeful than at any other time in her life. The work at the center had awakened leadership skills in her that she didn't even know she possessed. Buddy, despite his advanced age, continued to surprise. Recently, he had located a lost wallet inside an old sofa that had been donated to the center, a wallet that contained important documents belonging to a desperate family. The duo's story spread beyond the city limits. Universities sent researchers interested in studying Buddy's abilities, and animal protection organizations wanted to document the special lineage of the dogs. Dorothy always received these visitors politely, but made a point of directing attention to the social work developed at the center. For her, Buddy's fame was merely a tool to help more people. During one of these visits, a veterinarian specializing in animal behavior confirmed that Buddy truly possessed above-average sensory skills, developed through generations of careful selection. "It's a fascinating example of how traits can be preserved and enhanced over time," explained the professional. "This dog's lineage represents decades of care and attention to detail." The scientific explanation brought even more credibility to the work developed at the center. Journalists who initially came looking for a curious story about a magic dog left impressed by the project's real social impact. 2 years after her expulsion from home, Dorothy received an unexpected call. It was Richard, her eldest son, with a proposal that completely surprised her. "Mom, my siblings and I are thinking of selling our houses and moving closer to you," he said. "We want to be part of this family you've built." The proposal touched Dorothy's heart, but she knew her response had to be careful. Forgiveness had been given, but trust would need to be rebuilt gradually. "You are always welcome here, my children, but this new family I built doesn't replace you. It completes me," she replied wisely. "If you want to truly be part of it, you'll have to understand it's based on mutual respect and service to others." The children accepted the conditions and, in the following months, demonstrated genuine remorse through concrete actions. Richard used his savings to renovate the center, Patricia offered her nursing services voluntarily, and Stephen helped with the project's accounting. The family reconciliation happened naturally and gradually. Dorothy did not forget the suffering she had endured, but chose to use that experience as a foundation for more mature and honest relationships with her children. Buddy observed these changes with his characteristic canine wisdom. The animal seemed to understand that the family was rebuilding on more solid ground, and his reassuring presence helped ease occasional tensions. The center continued to grow and receive recognition. The City Hall offered official support to expand the services, and state organizations began using the project as a model for other cities. During a municipal recognition ceremony, Dorothy was honored as Citizen of the Year for her contribution to the community. In her acceptance speech, she made sure to credit Buddy as the true hero of the story. "This award belongs to everyone who believed that elderly people have value and can contribute to society," she said, moved. "And especially to my companion Buddy, who taught me that the greatest treasures are hidden in the most unexpected places." Buddy, now 16 years old, was present at the ceremony, lying calmly at Dorothy's feet. Despite his advanced age, his eyes still shone with the intelligence and affection that had won over so many people. The ceremony marked a moment of reflection for Dorothy. Looking back, she could hardly believe the transformation her life had undergone. From a despised and abandoned elderly woman, she had become a respected leader and a source of inspiration for hundreds of people. In the months that followed, Dorothy began to document her experience in the form of memoirs. Margaret helped her organize the chapters, turning the personal story into a practical guide for others facing similar situations. The book, Buddy and Me: A Journey from Abandonment to Hope, became a local success, with all proceeds being directed to keep the center running and expand its services to other cities. During the book signings, Dorothy always insisted on having Buddy by her side. The dog had grown accustomed to the attention and received affection from all visitors, always maintaining his gentle and intuitive temperament. One of the most striking stories that emerged during this period was that of a young woman who had lost custody of her children due to financial problems. Buddy located her during one of the busiest afternoons at the center and would not leave her side. The animal's intuition was correct. The woman was in despair and contemplating extreme actions. The conversation with Dorothy and the emotional support offered by the center helped her find legal resources to reverse her situation. Cases like this became frequent, proving that the work developed at the center went far beyond documentary or bureaucratic matters. It was a true human support center where people found reasons to keep fighting. Buddy turned 17 at a party organized especially for him. Hundreds of people who had been touched by his presence came to celebrate, bringing gifts and sharing stories about how the dog had impacted their lives. During the party, a veterinarian examined Buddy and was impressed with his physical condition for his age. "He is an exceptional animal in every sense," he commented. "His longevity is likely linked to the purpose he found in life." Dorothy completely agreed with that assessment. Buddy had found at the center not only a home but a mission that gave meaning to his existence. Every person helped, every object found, every moment of comfort offered nourished his spirit. Autumn arrived, bringing reflections on the future. Dorothy, now 70 years old, began to think about the continuity of the work developed at the center. She had trained a competent team, but she knew her personal leadership was important to maintain the original spirit of the project. It was during one of these reflections that Buddy once again demonstrated his special intuition. The dog began to spend more time near a young volunteer named Jennifer, 25 years old, who had recently joined the center. Jennifer had come to the center through her own story of hardship. A social work graduate but unemployed for months, she offered her volunteer services in exchange for practical experience. "Buddy seems to have chosen you as his new partner," observed Dorothy, noting how the animal always positioned himself near the young woman during activities. Jennifer was moved by the observation. She had developed a special connection with Buddy from the first day and seemed to intuitively understand his needs and signals. In the following months, Dorothy gradually began transferring responsibilities to Jennifer, always with Buddy silently approving each decision. It was as if the animal were preparing a natural leadership transition. The process was slow and careful. Jennifer demonstrated not only technical competence, but also the emotional sensitivity needed to deal with people in distress. Buddy seemed to have identified in her the right qualities to carry on the work. During a special meeting with all the volunteers and beneficiaries of the center, Dorothy officially announced that Jennifer would take over as the general coordinator of the project, with Dorothy remaining as an advisor and Buddy continuing as the moral supervisor of activities. The transition was met with enthusiasm by everyone. Jennifer had earned the community's respect through her dedicated work, and Buddy clearly approved of the choice through his constant presence beside the new coordinator. With the succession secured, Dorothy was able to dedicate herself to new projects. She began traveling to other cities, helping to establish similar centers and sharing her experience with other communities. Buddy, despite his advanced age, insisted on accompanying these trips. His presence was always well received, and he would often repeat his performance of locating lost objects or identifying people in special need of attention. During one of these trips to a town in the countryside, Buddy located a buried box containing documents belonging to a family that had lost their property due to unresolved bureaucratic issues from decades prior. The discovery allowed the family to reclaim their rights and served as further proof that Buddy's abilities were real and consistent. The case was documented and used to demonstrate the importance of properly preserving important documents. Back in their hometown, Dorothy and Buddy resumed their routine at the center. Now more relaxed with Jennifer leading the daily operations, the two veterans dedicated themselves mainly to handling special cases and training new volunteers. It was during one of these training sessions that Buddy demonstrated something that surprised even Dorothy. The dog managed to teach another young dog to identify people in an altered emotional state, passing on his special skills. "It's as if he knows he needs to prepare a successor," observed Jennifer, impressed by Buddy's patience in training the younger dog. The young dog, named Buddy Jr., showed a natural aptitude for the same skills as his mentor. Under the careful guidance of the original Buddy, he began to develop the intuition necessary for social work. The presence of two special dogs at the center multiplied the possibilities for care. While Buddy continued with more complex cases, Buddy Jr. began working with children and young people who visited the place. The relationship between the two animals became an additional attraction. Visitors were fascinated seeing how Buddy passed on knowledge to his disciple through practical demonstrations and infinite patience. Margaret, now 75 years old, continued offering legal consultation for the center, but also began documenting the phenomenon of the special dogs for the scientific community. "It's a unique example of knowledge transfer between animals in a social environment," she explained to interested researchers. "It goes beyond natural instinct and enters the territory of cultural learning." The center became a subject of study for several universities interested in both the social aspect of the project and the behavioral phenomenon of the dogs. Dorothy always cooperated with the research, but kept the focus on the social function of the work. During a conference on active aging, Dorothy was invited to present her experience as an example of how elderly people can find new purposes in life. Her lecture was received with enthusiasm by professionals from various fields. "Age does not determine a person's worth," she told the audience of experts. "My real life began at 68, when I learned that my value did not depend on the approval of others." Buddy, present at the conference, received a special tribute for his contribution to the development of the project. The official recognition of their special abilities helped legitimize the work developed at the center. In the following months, invitations to participate in similar events multiplied. Dorothy and Buddy became a well-known duo in circles dedicated to active aging and community social work. During one of these presentations, Dorothy met other elderly people who had transformed difficult experiences into social projects. The exchange of experiences resulted in a support network among different initiatives. Buddy demonstrated his adaptability by interacting well with the other therapy animals present at the events. His experience and balanced temperament made him a sort of mentor for younger dogs involved in similar work. National recognition arrived when the center received a state government award for its contribution to social welfare. The ceremony was held in the capital, with Dorothy and Buddy as special guests. During the event, the governor specifically mentioned Dorothy's story of overcoming adversity as an example of how public policies should support community initiatives led by the beneficiaries themselves. "This lady has transformed her personal pain into healing for hundreds of others," he said in his speech. "It's the kind of authentic leadership our society needs to value more." Buddy received a symbolic medal during the ceremony, formalizing his status as a social utility dog. The honor was the first of its kind awarded in the state, creating a precedent for recognizing animals in community work. Back in town, the duo was welcomed with a celebration by the community. The center organized a public celebration, gathering hundreds of people who wanted to show their affection and gratitude. During the speeches, Jennifer announced that the center had been selected to receive additional funding that would allow the expansion of services to include a community library and vocational workshops. "All of this started with a desperate lady and her loyal dog," said Jennifer, moved. "Today we have a center that serves over 1,000 people a month and serves as a model for other cities." Dorothy, now 71, reflected on the incredible journey she had undertaken. In 3 years, she had gone from an abandoned elderly woman to a respected community leader and a source of inspiration for thousands of people. Buddy, even at 18, maintained his energy and dedication. Veterinarians remarked that they rarely saw animals of his age with so much vitality, attributing his longevity to the clear purpose he had found in life. The center continued to evolve and adapt to the needs of the community. New services were added, including psychological care for the elderly, family mediation, and craft workshops that generated income for participants. Dorothy specialized in family conflict mediation, using her own experience of reconciliation with her children as a basis to help other families resolve misunderstandings. Buddy Jr. had fully developed and now worked independently, but always under the discreet supervision of his mentor. The pair of dogs had become an informal tourist attraction for the town. During an interview for a documentary on active aging, Dorothy summarized her life philosophy. "People think life ends when we get old. In fact, it can begin again if we are willing to find our true purpose." The documentary was broadcast nationally and generated interest from other organizations in replicating the center's model in different regions of the country. Dorothy became a consultant for these new projects. At 72, she traveled regularly to guide the implementation of similar centers, always accompanied by Buddy. Her lectures blended practical aspects with emotional reflections on overcoming adversity and renewal. During one of these trips, Buddy demonstrated his skills by locating a lost document that had prevented the opening of a new center. The find not only solved the practical problem, but also convinced the local community of the authenticity of the work. The success of the original model led to the creation of a national foundation dedicated to supporting the elderly in situations of family abandonment. Dorothy was invited to join the board of directors, a position she accepted with pride. Buddy attended all the foundation's meetings, becoming a sort of official mascot. His reassuring presence helped maintain the humanitarian focus of the discussions, reminding everyone of the project's emotional origins. The foundation developed protocols to identify and support the elderly in situations similar to what Dorothy had faced. Buddy Jr. was trained to be part of the field teams, expanding the reach of the work. During a special ceremony, Dorothy was named National Ambassador for Dignified Aging, a title that reflected her impact on changing perspectives about the value of the elderly in society. Buddy, now 19 years old, still participated in the most important events, but began to have a reduced schedule to preserve his health. Even so, his presence continued to be requested for special moments. The original center continued to grow under the leadership of Jennifer, who had become a recognized expert in community social work. The partnership between different generations proved to be fundamental to the project's continued success. Dorothy began writing a second book, this time focused on practical strategies for creating community support centers. Her accumulated experience would be systematized to facilitate the replication of the model. During writing sessions, Buddy would often lie at her feet, providing the quiet companionship that had marked the entire journey. Even in silence, his presence continued to be a source of inspiration and strength. The relationship between Dorothy and her children had matured completely. Richard, Patricia, and Stephen became active supporters of the center and developed their own social projects inspired by their mother. "You taught us that the true value of a family isn't in blind obedience, but in mutual respect and contribution to something greater," said Patricia during a family gathering. This family transformation became an additional example of the transformative power of conscious forgiveness and rebuilding relationships on more mature and honest foundations. Buddy turned 20 at a celebration that brought together people from across the state. Veterinarians confirmed it was an exceptional age for a large breed dog, attributing his longevity to his clear purpose and the loving environment in which he lived. During the party, the creation of a permanent fund was announced to ensure the continuity of the work started by Dorothy and Buddy. The community's contribution demonstrated the lasting impact the pair had caused. Dorothy, now 73 years old, remained active, but began to focus more on training new leaders. She developed a mentorship program for people who wanted to create similar projects in their communities. Buddy, despite his advanced age, maintained his ability to identify people in special need of attention. His accumulated experience made him even more precise in his intuitive assessments. Dorothy's second book was launched with great success, providing a practical manual for creating community support centers. The royalties were donated to expand the national network of similar projects. During the book launch tour, Buddy made his final official trip. Even with increasing physical limitations, he insisted on accompanying Dorothy to the most important events, demonstrating his dedication until the end. The national impact of the work they developed resulted in the creation of a specific public policy to support elderly people abandoned by their families. Dorothy was consulted during the drafting of the legislation. This law represents the recognition that every person has the right to dignity, regardless of age or family circumstances, she commented during the signing ceremony. Buddy was present at the ceremony, receiving affection from politicians and officials who had followed his extraordinary journey. His presence symbolized the importance of looking beyond conventions to find innovative solutions. In the following months, Buddy's health began to show signs of natural age-related decline. Veterinarians specializing in canine geriatrics monitored his condition, ensuring comfort and quality of life. Dorothy began to dedicate more time to the company of her faithful friend, reducing external commitments to be present during this delicate phase. It was her way of repaying all the dedication she had received over the years. The center organized special activities to allow the community to show affection for Buddy during his last active months. Hundreds of people came to thank the animal in person for everything he had done. Buddy Jr. gradually assumed all active responsibilities, but remained close to his mentor, as if he knew it was important to absorb the last available teachings. During a quiet spring morning, Buddy lay down in his favorite spot in the center's garden and closed his eyes for the last time. He was beside Dorothy, surrounded by the love and gratitude of an entire community. His passing was marked by an emotional ceremony that brought together thousands of people who wanted to pay their final respects. Dorothy, even moved, maintained the dignity and strength that had characterized her journey. Buddy taught us that the true value of a life is not measured in years, but in the love shared and the lives touched, she said during the farewell speech. A monument was erected at the center in honor of Buddy, with a plaque summarizing his contribution. In memory of Buddy, the dog who taught an entire community about hope, purpose, and unconditional love. Dorothy continued her work with renewed dedication, honoring the memory of her companion through the continued expansion of the center's social impact. Buddy Jr. developed fully, carrying forward his mentor's legacy. Years later, when asked about the secret of her life transformation, Dorothy always answered, "Sometimes our greatest treasures come disguised as tragedy. Buddy taught me that true love does not abandon, even when all seems lost." The center that began as a desperate refuge became a permanent institution, helping thousands of people find dignity and purpose in their lives. The story of Dorothy and Buddy became a local legend, inspiring future generations. At 75, Dorothy remained active, surrounded by the respect and affection of the community she helped transform. Her life had proven that it is never too late to discover our true worth and make a difference in the world. Buddy's legacy continued to live on through Buddy Jr. and the other dogs trained in the special lineage. His unique ability to identify human suffering and locate lost objects continued to help people in need. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this moving story of overcoming adversity. Do you believe Dorothy made the right decisions in turning her pain into purpose? Leave your opinion in the comments with sincere words. What touched your heart the most in this journey of Buddy and Dorothy? Thank you so much for your company, And don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories.